The Star-Spangled Banner, the United States of America's national anthem. It is alarming to know that two-thirds of the United States population does not know all the words to the national anthem. As a sense of pride and support of our country, this is something that should not be forgotten. Here are a few examples of how the national anthem is being forgotten.
Oh, see, can you see what it dawns early light was so held the twilight at the last gleaming was bright, who brought us fight o'er the rapids we wanted mystery man, and the rocket's red glare, bombs bursting in air, gave through the night that the stars were still there, of silver yet wait, brave and the home of the free.
The rocket's red glare, the bombs were seen in air, gave proof through the night. Through the night, love was still there. As the starlight dawned, and the heart
Whose bright stripes and bright stars and the heavenly light o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly fleeting. And the home of the and the rockets that fast. Uh-oh. The bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that a flag was still there. I'll make up for it now. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for
Oh, Canada, my native home, my own love's young and free. From far and wide, may they stand on guard. Black. I need the words. I need the words. Sorry.
In case you're one of those two-thirds of Americans that don't know anything about the national anthem, here's a refresher for you. Star-Spangled Banner was written during the War of 1812. The war was being fought because of British trade restrictions and impressment of American merchant sailors in the British Navy. Impressment means the British were forcing American merchant sailors to be members of the British Royal Navy. You may not know that the song was written originally as a poem. Here's how it all went down. The British had already stopped in Marlborough, Maryland. There, they met Dr. William Beans, who offered his home to General Ross and Admiral Cockburn as their headquarters. The general then assumed that Dr. Beans was a British sympathizer. The British left Marlborough and marched to Washington, D.C., where they burned many public buildings, including the White House. On their way back to Marlborough, some British deserters pillaged and plundered some of the surrounding farms. Dr. Beans and some of his friends rounded up those responsible and took them to their local prison. One of them managed to escape and reported back to General Ross. General Ross was very angry to hear that Dr. Beans, who seemed to be a British supporter, was in fact not a supporter at all. So, General Ross took Dr. Beans and his friends as prisoners. Before returning to their ship in the Chesapeake Bay, General Ross released many of the captives, but kept Dr. Beans and a few others and then boarded their ship, the HMS Tonnant. A lawyer named Francis Scott Key and U.S. prisoner exchange agent Colonel Skinner were enlisted to negotiate the release of Dr. Beans and the other prisoners. They took their own ship to the HMS Tonnant and began negotiations. At first, it did not go well, and General Ross refused to release the prisoners. Finally, Colonel Skinner used his secret weapon, a collection of letters from wounded British soldiers detailing how well they were treated by Dr. Beans and other Americans. General Ross finally agreed to release Dr. Beans. Although General Ross agreed to release the prisoners, Francis Scott Key and Colonel Skinner had overheard too much of the British plans to attack Fort McHenry that night. Francis Scott Key, Colonel Skinner, Dr. Beans, and the other prisoners were allowed to board their own ship, but were not permitted to go back to Baltimore. All through the night, Key, Skinner, and Beans anxiously waited for any glimpse of how the Americans were doing during the battle. The only time they could see anything was when bombs exploded, lighting up the night sky. When the sun finally started coming up on the morning of September 14, 1814, Francis Scott Key feared the worst. To his joy and surprise, the U.S. flag still flew over Fort McHenry. The British had failed to capture Fort McHenry. Francis Scott Key was so inspired that he wrote a poem about everything that happened that night on the ship as the British attacked. He called it The Defense of Fort McHenry. The poem became extremely popular and was later set to the tune To Anacreon in Heaven. It was also renamed the Star-Spangled Banner. Other songs were used as national anthems in the United States. It wasn't until 1931 that President Herbert Hoover signed a resolution officially naming the Star-Spangled Banner as our national anthem. Here is what we typically sing at sporting events and other occasions. "Oh, say can you see, by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming." This is exactly what happened that night on board the ship. Some of the words are a little outdated and can be a little tricky. Here's what some of them mean. Dawn. Dawn is the first appearance of daylight in the morning. Hailed, or to hail, means to cheer, salute, greet, or welcome. Twilight. Twilight is a soft light from the sky when the sun is below the horizon from sunset to nightfall. The next stanza, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. The word perilous means hazardous or dangerous or containing great peril. Or is a tricky one. This means an abbreviation for the word over. Poets use this abbreviation to get the word over, which is 2 syllables, down to 1 syllable to fit in their poetry. Ramparts. Fortifications, or a mound of earth raised as a fortification around a place and usually capped with a stone parapet. Gallantly, or gallant, means brave, spirited, noble-minded, or chivalrous. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Again, this is exactly what happened on board the ship. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? This last stanza is a question. They want to know, is the flag still flying over Fort McHenry? The word spangled, sprinkled or studded with small bright pieces, objects, spots. This would be the stars on the American flag. National Anthem etiquette. Etiquette means conventional requirements as to social behavior for any occasion. In this case, here are a few things you should do when singing the National Anthem. You should stand up if you are able to. If you're wearing a hat, you should take it off. You can place your right hand over your heart. You should be looking at the flag if there is one available. And you should sing your best. Singing the National Anthem is not about being the greatest singer in the world. It's about showing your pride and support for your country. But why do we do all of this?
My grandfather loved to watch boxing on TV, and I'll never forget whenever they played the National Anthem before the fight, he would stand up. I never heard him sing, but he'd stand up right there in the living room with no one else around but a 4-year-old little boy who wanted to be just like his granddad. And so it goes, we learn when to stand for America. We go to school and we read about George Washington, Paul Revere. We're told about Abraham Lincoln and the fight to live up to the promise that all men should be free. We learn about declarations, rights, and liberty. We try to wrap our hearts and minds around the sacrifices and the heroes that made us and keep us free. And so it goes, we learn why we should stand for America. Who knows how many times in your life you'll hear that anthem or recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Most we won't even remember. But once in a great while, we stand up for America, not because we should, but because we want to. Moments when history is so close we can reach out and touch it. We feel America with every fabric of our being. We see her in every face, hear her in every voice, and grow to love her more with every tear. And at those moments, America's story becomes our story. History becomes personal, and we the people become more than we were, more aware, more connected, not only to family and friends, but to the people who were the very first to stand for America. Extraordinary men and women who did the unthinkable and gave birth to a free nation, determined that their children, our children, will always have a chance to become more than they are. And so it goes, their dream becomes our dream, and our responsibility to inspire our children to hold themselves accountable to ideals that too often feel like folklore or fairy tales, to help them make not just a connection, but a commitment to a story that continues, that they are part of, that needs to be shared again and again until we want to do more than simply stand up and say, I am an American. But want to say, let me tell you the story of where I'm from. We call it the land of the free, the home of the brave, and there are a million good reasons why.